Welcome to your True Real Estate 911 weekly update with your local real estate pro, Lisa Treu, with some interesting, important, and impactful information for you this week. We're coming up on that season. It is tax time for properties when we, in the not-so-distant future, we're going to get that first notice, that proposed property tax rate based upon the property appraiser's depiction of what our property value had done in the year. And so we're going to get into what those numbers look like, what it means for you. Lisa's going to be sharing all this information. I want to remind you, as we get going today, that the Treu's website, it's a wonderful resource for you. Get started at TrueRealEstate911.com. That's TrueRealEstate911.com. You can search like a real estate agent. You can get an appraisal of your property that is more accurate than you'll get at sites like Zillow and Realtor.com or anything else. And, of course, phone number we can reach out to the Treu Group 7 days a week, 561-972-8326, 561-972-8326. You know, Lisa, we are funny creatures. I mean, we're human, which means that we're inherently fallible, and we have these emotions that can be our friends and our enemies. And most homeowners are excited to hear that their property is appreciating in value.
Of course.
Until it costs them more money.
Right.
And so the good news, bad news situation about the information on Palm Beach County property taxes.
Well, the good news is that our taxable value is up for the majority of us. In fact, 86% of all properties in Palm Beach County will see that their prices went up. That's not a big surprise, I don't think, to anyone. And, it's good news. Like you said, until we see what's going to happen with our tax bill. However, it just had to happen.
So, that really does speak to how widespread the recovery had been. I mean, it's one thing to talk about. It's another thing when you do see that basically 9 out of 10 properties, had recovered. One of the first things that we should mention, I know that this is always confusing for people, especially if you're new to home ownership, that this is not based on anything that's happened this year.
Correct. This is actually old data. People get really confused when they take a look at when their taxes are due and what you're paying for, and also what the values are. So this is actually last year's value. It's over a year old.
It's based on 2013 information.
It is. So we're not even talking about the improvement of 2014 yet. We're just dealing with 2013's appreciation. So once again, it's good news. It's another reason, one of the many reasons that homestead exemption is so important if you qualify. I'm amazed that people that move here that qualify that don't actually go and file for homestead exemption. And certainly if you haven't done that, next year, you're going to want to file that.
And if you purchase property, the first thing is you need to get it in, because if we get to January and it's not done, you're out in the cold for another year on it. You mentioned the homestead exemption. In addition to capping the increase at no more than, 3% per year?
Right.
So that you only have to deal with the increased tax liability of up to 3%. So even, let's say, the appraiser's office says that your home appreciated by 15 or 20%. The liability that you have to eat in the form of higher property taxes would be 3%, potentially offset, good or bad, by whatever your municipality, if you live in, an incorporated area within the county, what they decide to do.
Yes. I mean, remember, this is not about what you're going to pay. This is about value. We always talk about that they're, the actual amount you're going to pay will depend on what the municipality or what the county does with this information. The projection is that if you do not have homestead, that you very likely could see a 10% increase in taxes. So once again, it just shows you that if you have taken advantage of that homestead, you're going to have a substantial savings over someone who maybe didn't make that filing.
And, there are a couple of things. One, a 10% increase, what could that mean to you? Well, the last time I took a look at the average property tax bill around Palm Beach County, you're taking a look at an average liability in the neighborhood of $5,000. So you're talking about $500 more. For some people, that could mean that not only do you have to pay more, but if you're financed, it also means that your escrow could end up going up because your mortgage company sees that your property tax liability goes higher. And so they start every month starting next year, hitting you for more in your mortgage payment that will go into escrow to pay future property tax liability. And so there are lots of implications here if you don't manage this as well as you could.
Well, not only that, if you do have an escrow account and this year's goes up, well, you've been paying into your escrow account based on last year's estimate. So not only do you have the increase in the escrow account or their monthly payment for this year, you've got to bridge that 10% arrears unless you can write the check. So it can impact somebody more than what they're realizing. And like you said, I think that when our values are going up, you do have to anticipate. I mean, even next year, I think we're going to see a similar news that values obviously in 2014 have, for most communities, continued to rise. So you need to manage that and budget for it and plan that you could have a little bit of a gap. So it's not going into your monthly payment. It's actually something you're able to manage maybe when it happens.
And you also brought up, within the context of the importance of homestead exemption, there's something else that we need to consider, and that is protection. So part of it is not just, capping our potential property tax liability. This is something that if you're new to Florida home ownership, you might not be familiar with, because in terms of your protection with homestead, some states don't have it at all. Other states, they have certain protections. We have one of the 3 strongest homestead laws in the entire country. In California, there's not much protection there. The upside of that is, you really could walk away from a property if you're ever underwater, and outside of your credit being significantly impaired, they're not going to come after you for liability or anything. Well, the trade-off here, you hear about deficiencies, and, if you end up short selling a home, or if you were foreclosed on, that deficiency is something that might be pursued against you and something you have to account for. The flip side of that, the reason we have that, is that we also have the protection that we could even go through bankruptcy, and our home cannot be taken away from us as long as we stay current. If we have a mortgage, we stay current with our property taxes. So your home, that homestead protection, as long as you stay current on your liabilities there, it will always be yours regardless of what happens at any point during your period of home ownership.
Yes, it's a huge protection. People that have businesses, people that have other investments, it's just such a great thing. And there's a reason why there's a movement by many to Florida, because we have, so many protections, like you said, that other states just don't have. And of course, without the state income tax, there's just so many reasons why businesses, the wealthy make Florida home, besides the fact that we have great winter weather here. That helps. But it's certainly something to take advantage of that protection.
Heck, even out of season, so to speak, I still think we have better weather. You take a look at New York City right now, and they're often 10 degrees hotter than we are. So
well, and that's it. I don't think we're hotter. I think we're just hotter longer. That's the only thing. We just start a little bit earlier, but I agree. When I look across the map, I think that our weather, at least we have amazing breezes here, and I agree with you. I think it's paradise year round.
Okay, so, as we're talking about, the homesteading, property tax values that are appreciating, there are a couple of things. The property appraiser's website, over the years, property appraiser Gary Nicholas, he's been very helpful, a contributor to the show. His office, very easy to get in touch with if you have questions, and also to look up the information. By the way, this is, as we're on this topic, something that probably everybody should do. After you've sent in your information for homesteading, you should probably go back to the website, make sure it got applied. The odds are it did, but, why leave it to chance? Make sure it's on there. Make sure you're accounted for if you have any questions. And the other thing, too, is they always have a history of property tax information there as well, because you might hear, that 86% of properties are appreciating this year. We're going to see increases. It can be somewhat confusing to understand, historically what that might mean to our property.
I think that's important. I think the other thing is important. If you, for some reason, are not at your residence, because they will mail something to your home, your homestead, to verify that that's still your homestead. If there's an extenuating circumstance, and legitimately it is still your homestead, you need to reach out to them and have a conversation so you don't lose that homestead benefit. Maybe you have a job situation, you're gone for just a couple months or something, and now you have your mail forwarded. You have to really look at that, but call them and have a conversation. I have found that they have been so great to work with, as long as you can validate that this still is your homestead, and look for that little confirmation card. Steve and I still keep them. I think we have them going back, for forever, even though we can probably get rid of all those. But, we keep that confirmation card that they mail out that says this confirms that you have your homestead. I think you probably only need to keep it a year, unlike taxes. But like I said, look for that. And if you're not getting it, start asking why, especially if you've, been out of town or you've had your mail forwarded. Just make sure that you get that benefit.
All right, good information. Want to transition because you had mentioned that there's something else I was surprised to hear that is a real consideration and concern right now, and it's kind of what's old is new again. We know that property insurance has been a real bugaboo, real headache for a lot of Floridians for a long time. I mean, we haven't had a hurricane that has significantly impacted our area in 9 years, yet we still feel the impact not only from those storms, but many of the storms that have hit other parts of the country, that they just kind of lop us all together and go, well, you're in a high-risk zone, so, Sandy might have hit the Northeast, but you're going to pay for it too. All these different things. I had been, and it might be even under a misconception, but I see that more private insurance companies are coming back into Florida. I see that Citizens is selling off consistently a lot of their policies and are now under I believe a million count and trying to continue to shrink. And that leads me to believe that things are getting better in Florida's property insurance market, but that may not necessarily tell the story. Well,
I think there's a lot of anxiety. And I think anytime you get a cancellation, the first reaction is that of anxiety. I mean, Steve and I we were covered by Citizens. We received our cancellation this year. And, went, oh my gosh, Citizen, no, they don't cancel anybody in theory, right? That's the last resort.
Your first emotion was different than the one that happened when we got canceled by Citizens.
I'm sure.
My first was anger, then anxiousness. So.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But I hear you.
Yours is a little bit more complicated, so I understand the anger. And the good news was there was an insurance company out there for us, and we actually saved money, which was really great news. So I don't know that there's an issue. I think that there's an appearance of an issue.
Okay.
So I think people are concerned. Buyers that are coming in, we're having more conversations about insurance and insurance options than we ever have. And it stems from, and honestly, on our listings, the other agents are maybe not having all the information. And so buyers are just, I can't get insurance. The one thing I will tell you that is kind of the big issue with insurance companies right now is there's a lot of communities that are at end of life for roofs.
Okay.
They're not leaking.
Yeah.
They're just getting to end of life. And so it is impacting that a little bit.
To back up a little bit, just for the layman, and I'm one of them in the subject, by the way, I'm just learning because, hey, I'm in a similar situation, but when you put on a certain type of roof, there is a life expectancy that's an estimate based upon the type of roof and when it was put in.
Correct.
And so let's say that you have a 25-year roof, for example, and your property is 24 years old. Now your insurance company can go back and say, well, you have the original roof. Statistically, this thing is on its last leg. We're going to have a problem soon. So we're going to have to account for that somewhere along the way.
Well, right. And will it stand up to if we have a hurricane?
Yeah.
Will it withstand, if it were new, would it withstand the winds better than obviously a 24 or 25-year-old roof? So they look at those things. And the challenge is that, I have clients that are buying in homes in communities, and it's not that home has it, it's the whole community. It's just time. And yet no one's roofs are leaking. So most people aren't just saying, well, it might go this year, it might go next year. They're going to wait until there's some sort of legitimate either structural concern or, they have issues with cracked tiles or shingles curling or things like that. So it is that's probably the one thing that we deal with. And the great news is if you have the right insurance person, they know which companies will underwrite in certain criteria. So there's some that won't do a roof over 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
And we're talking about tilers.
Oh.
So there's some, and they just know that, okay, I've got an older roof. I'm not going to that company. There's some that will do it if it's in certain areas. So having somebody who really understands options, I think that insurance companies that have multiple options is really, I think, a good thing today.
That's a really good point and really good information as well, because that can be a confusing component of all of this is insurance, and it certainly is upsetting to homeowners if they just out of the blue get canceled. It can also be, weird for homeowners that recently purchased a property that then find out that, maybe that comes up. The insurance company says, sure, we're going to cover you. Then they come back and say, well, your roof's a problem. So, what you say, I think, makes the most sense. Just make sure you're informed on the front end. And I know that anytime that you're working with somebody, you're going to make sure that we have the answers so that we aren't left on our own to feel as though, hey, good luck.
Well, and we're actually on our listings many times finding the answers for the other agent's buyer, because we'll go to our seller and get their information and pass that along about here's who's insuring them, here's about what they're paying, and here's who their insurance agent is, so that we can get that information even when it's not our buyer.
All right, great information on today's show. And again, TrueRealEstate911.com. Great place to get started for all of your real estate considerations. TrueRealEstate911.com. And the Treus, you have questions, need answers, whether you're buying, selling, or you really do just have questions, they're happy to help you out. 7 days a week. Call 561-972-8326. That's 561-972-8326.